He's online. Okay. Come on in. Welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand. Please get your drinks. Please get your food. We're going to get the panel started. My name is Phil Robertson. I'm a member of the Leadership Council of Fortify Rights, and I'm also a board member of the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand. And I want to thank you all for spending your Friday night with us to hear about the situation of Ukraine, Russia, and the impacts that war there is having on Southeast Asia and South Asia. Before we get into the panel, however, I want to tell you a little bit more about some of the other events that are coming up at the FCCT in the coming days. People who are members of the FCCT can get into all events for free, so we do encourage you to join the club. Coming on the 11th of March, we're going to have a film, Rohingya Ramadan, which offers a rare and intimate view of life inside the world's largest refugee camp, seen through the eyes of a number of its residents, which was filmed during Ramadan in 2025. This is a documentary that is going to be running also in the Middle East on Al Jazeera on all its channels. We are going to have that film showing. We'll have a panel with the filmmaker and a number of people, both from NGO and UN agencies working in the camps. And there will also be a gallery hanging new photos on the wall and opportunities to buy photos that will benefit education in the refugee camps. And that's Wednesday, the 11th, starting at 7 p.m. Next Thursday, March 12th at 7 p.m., what's next for Thailand after February 8th election? We will have a panel of distinguished analysts talking about Thailand's February 8th general election, which of course delivered a decisive victory for now Prime Minister Anutin Chanvirakul and the Phumjai Thai Party. We're going to have people like Fuadi Pitsuwan, Tom Krutsapon, and others coming to say what that election means and what will be next in Thailand. So that's Thursday, the 12th of March. And then on Friday, March 13th, longtime member of the club, photographer from the war years in Vietnam, who then stayed for many years, Lance Woodruff has passed away, and we're going to have a wake for Lance at the club on March 13th. That's Friday at 7 p.m. And then finally, on Monday, March 16th at 2 p.m., the International Crisis Group is coming in, and they're going to be talking about Asia's security order in flux, the role of U.S. allies. I think what's happened, of course, in the Middle East in the past 6 days is certainly going to affect that analysis. And we'll have the president and the CEO of the International Crisis Group here with analysts from Philippines, Korea, the deputy director of the Asia program, and their senior analyst for Southeast Asia. So it's a very busy coming weeks. Oh, and finally, one other one. There's a group of people around the world who have a goal of traveling to every single country in the world. It's called Extreme Travel. And on Wednesday, March 18th, we're going to have an event where a number of these people who have traveled to between 160 and 180 countries so far are going to come and talk about what motivates them. And that's on Wednesday, March 18th at 7 p.m. So tonight, we're going to be talking about the situation in Ukraine, the Russian invasion, and how that affects us here in Southeast Asia. The consequences of this war are not confined to Europe. The ripple effects are being felt across the region, and we have a distinguished panel to tell us why. But to kick off the event first, we're honored to have Viktor Semenov. He is a chargé d'affaires of Ukraine to Thailand, and he's going to give some opening remarks. So let me turn the dais over to him.
Good evening, dear friends. It's a great honor for me to be today here. And first of all, let me first thank Truth Hounds, Fortify Rights, and Foreign Correspondents Club for the organization of this discussion and this important event. Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, as you know, began in 2014 and escalated in a full-scale invasion in 2022. It must be acknowledged that since February 24, practically the entire world has been living in new reality. Lawlessness, impunity, and the triumph of totalitarian regimes. This is what the Kremlin and its satellites are truly trying to demonstrate to the world. Moscow no longer hides behind the mask of the peacemaker to the world, but openly declares its intention to establish its power in foreign states by armed force, and attempting to demonstrate this in practice in Ukraine. The aggression unleashed by the Russian Federation in gross violation of international law, committing war crimes and crimes against humanity, employing methods of terror and act of genocide against Ukrainians, became the largest armed conflict in Europe since the Second World War. Since the beginning of Russia's war of aggression, Ukrainian investigators, international institutions, and civil society organizations have documented systematically atrocities against civilians, executions, torture, target attacks with VPF, drones, forced deportation, and the illegal transfer of Ukrainian children. The fifth year of Russia's full-scale aggression is accompanied by the massive and systematic use of torture against Ukrainian prisoners of war in civilians. 95% of Ukrainian prisoners of war are systematically tortured in captivity. At least 337 Ukrainian POWs were brutally executed by Russians in violation of international humanitarian law, including the Geneva Convention. Electroshocks, detention, and use of sexual violence, prolonged and incommunicate detention. The independent UN Commission of Inquiry into Ukraine has reached a clear conclusion. Those actions are systematic and massive, carried out within the framework of coordinated state policy, and constitute crimes against humanity. Allow me to be direct about what Russia is doing. Russia has killed tens of thousands of Ukrainian citizens, systematically destroyed our cities. The terror against Ukrainian critical infrastructure did not stop for a single day. Russian forces have deliberately targeted hospitals, schools, maternity facilities, energy and water supply infrastructure. Over 4 years of Russia's full-scale military invasion on Ukraine, Russia has carried out more than 5,000 attacks on Ukrainian energy system. Russia deliberately trying to inflict conditions of life calculated to bring about physical destruction of the Ukrainian people, which falls exactly under the definition of Article 2 of the Genocide Convention. 2 days ago, it was 4 years from the date when the Russian Federation violated nuclear and radiation safety by seizing the largest in Europe, Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. In addition, in 2025, Russian drone attack damaged the protective confinement of the Chernobyl's nuclear power plant. Russian forces grossly violate the provision of the Chemical Weapons Convention. As of December 2025, nearly 12,000 cases of enemies use hazard chemical substances have been recorded. Moreover, the aggressor committed a horrific crime of ecocide. The most severe example was the blowing up the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant dam. About 80 towns and villages, as well as the significant part of agricultural land, were flooded. It was an unpunished war crime of genocide. Vast areas of Ukraine have been mined, including agricultural land. This poses a danger to our citizens, while at the same time affecting global food security, as Ukraine is one of the main food suppliers in the world. The central point I would like to make tonight is Russia's war of genocide aggression against Ukraine is not confined to Europe. Its consequences are already reached South and Southeast Asia. And that means the questions of accountability for this war is also relevant for beyond Ukraine. Let me highlight several developments that demonstrate why this war matters for countries in the region. First, we are seeing the dying exploitation of citizens from South Asia in Russia's war of aggression. Investigators have documented cases where recruiters and intermediators deceived men from Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka, promising work abroad and instead sending them to fight in Ukraine. Some of those cases resemble human trafficking into an armed conflict. This illustrated a troubling reality. Russia's war is not only affecting Ukrainians, it's also putting Asian citizens directly into the conflict. Second, Russia's war is connected to growing geopolitical activity in Southeast Asia. The deepening partnership between Russia and the military junta in Myanmar is one of these examples. Russia has become one of the junta's key international partners, supplying weapons and expanding nuclear energy cooperation, including projects pursued by Rosatom. Russia involves the North Korean military in the war of aggression against Ukraine, which led to the internalization of the war. About 5,000 North Korean soldiers are believed to have been killed or injured, after estimate 12,000 were sent to counteract Ukrainians' operation in Russia's Kursk region. But 10,000 North Korean soldiers remain on the territory of the Russian as of February 2026. It's extremely dangerous that they are gaining knowledge about modern war. Those developments matter because they are strengthening actors already accused of the serious violation of international law, and they show how Russia's global strategy linked to the war in Ukraine increasingly intersects with the security dynamics in Asia. Third, the war has significantly reshaped global energy and trade flows. After sanctions were imposed, Russia redirected large volumes of oil export to Asia. Countries such as India have become major buyers of discounted Russian oil. While every country understandably pursues its economical interest, this situation also illustrates a broader reality. The revenues generated from those exports help finance the continuation of this war of aggression. The longer the war continues, the more instability it creates for global markets, supply chains, and international security. For many countries in Southeast Asia, questions of sovereignty and territorial integrity are not abstract. They are fundamental principles of regional stability. ASEAN as itself was built on the idea that states must respect sovereignty and resolve disputes peacefully. If a large state can invade its neighbor, annex territory, commit genocide, and escape accountability, the consequences extend far beyond Europe. It weakens the entire systems of rules that protect states, particularly middle and smaller powers. In this sentence, the issue of accountability for aggression is not about Ukraine alone. It's about the credibility of the international order that protects all states. Ukraine and its partners are therefore working of two complementary mechanisms. First, the Special Tribunal for the Crime of Aggression against Ukraine. This tribunal will focus on leadership responsibility for the decision to launch the war. Existing international court cannot fully address this crime. The tribunal complements the International Criminal Court and aims to ensure that the political and military leadership responsible for initiating the war are held legally accountable. The principle behind it is simple. Launching a war of aggression must carry consequences. Second, we are establishing the international compensation mechanism. The first step is already Operation The Register of Damage for Ukraine, created within the framework of the Council of Europe, but open globally. The next stage will be the creation of International Claims Commission to assess those claims and determine compensation. This model follows international precedents including the United Nations Compensation Commission created after Iraq's invasion of the Kuwait. The convention to establish the International Claims Commission for Ukraine has been signed last December in The Hague, and it's open for signature, all for 94 states which supported the compensation mechanism in the UN in 2022. The register of damage is receiving claims from individuals, companies, and the Ukrainian state for damage caused by Russia's aggression. Everyone who has suffered damage, loss, or injury from Russia's aggression on the territory of Ukraine can submit claims, including Thai and other Asian nations and companies. For example, in March 2022, a missile struck the Bangladesh flag vessel while it was trapped in the Ukrainian port of Oliva, killing a Bangladesh crew member and destroying the ship. Thousands of foreign sailors from Asia countries were also trapped in Ukrainian port at the start of the invasion, facing serious risks to their lives. And citizens from countries across South and South Asia who lived, studied, or worked in Ukraine were forced to flee the war, often leaving property and livelihood behind. Those cases demonstrate an important point. Russia's war has not only harmed Ukrainians, it's also harmed citizens and businesses from many parts of the world, including Asia. The international compensation mechanism is designed to ensure that all victims of Russia's aggression, regardless of nationality, have a path to justice and compensation. This is another reason why support from countries in Asia, including Thailand, is so important. The mechanism we are building is not just about Ukraine. It's about protecting the rights of victims of aggression everywhere. The goal is to ensure that responsibility for the war translates into real compensations for the victims. Support from countries across Asia, including Thailand, is extremely important for those efforts. Because the principles at stake are universal: sovereignty, territorial integrity, accountability for the aggression, and the rule of international law. There are also principles that ASEAN and Thailand have consistently supported in international forums. Participation by Asian states would therefore reinforce an important message: that the prohibition of aggression is a global norm, not a regional one. We are deeply convinced that without justice, there will be no dignified and just peace. War either ends with a just solution, or war inevitably returns again in an even larger and more dangerous form. Peace without responsibility is a pause in the hostilities, but certainly not a solution to the problem. Peace without consequences for the aggressor is the invitation to repeat those actions in different parts of the world and an example for other authoritarian regimes. For Ukraine, this issue of responsibility is not a theoretical discussion. It's a response to a systematic Russian crimes against humanity and war crimes, abduction of children, attacks on our energy infrastructure designed to physically destroy Ukrainians, torture and executions of Ukrainian prisoners of war and civilians, destruction of the environment and propaganda that openly calls for the genocide of Ukrainians. Of particular pain is illegal deportation of Ukrainian children from the territories of Ukraine occupied by Russia. The arrest warrants that have already been issued have become an important step, but thousands of families are await further decisions and the real implementation of the justice. Ukraine continues to closely cooperate with the International Criminal Court in documenting crimes, protecting witnesses, and strengthening the evidence base. In 2024, we ratified the Rome Statute and last year finally became full members of the ICC. Accountability for crimes against humanity, war crimes, and genocide is the integral part of a just and lasting peace. We will never give up on this because we understand that without justice there can be no lasting peace. Let me conclude with one thought. Wars of aggression rarely remain regional. They reshape global politics, global economics, and global security. The international community now face a choice. Either the prohibition of aggression remain a real rule of international law, or it becomes a precedent that others may follow. What happens in Ukraine will influence the future of international law everywhere, including Asia. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. That was quite impassioned and quite comprehensive, so I appreciate you so much for coming. One of the things that Fortify Rights and Truth Hounds has done has just come out with this new report, which is, I'm holding up the summary, I Was Tricked into the War, which talks about the situation of people from South Asia who have ended up on the front lines of the war in Ukraine. And I wanted to, first of all, ask Oksana Polkachuk, who is the co-executive director of Truth Hounds. You might ask yourself, what is Truth Hounds? Truth Hounds is an organization in Ukraine that works to ensure justice for victims of international crimes committed in armed conflicts and to prevent such violations in the future. Since 2014, that organization's been documenting and investigating international crimes and serious human rights abuses in Ukraine and across Eastern Europe, the Caucasus, and Central Asia. So I wanted to start with you and ask you a little bit more about this report. What did you all do? What did you all find? What were the key issues in the Ukraine side of the investigation where you found that people were ending up on these front lines?
Sure. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you today about this and other issues around influence of the Russian war against Ukraine on South and Southeast Asia. So coming to the report, after the full-scale invasion, the number of foreigners who were found in the Ukrainian captivity had been growing quickly. There were different nationalities all around the world, and it became quite clear that part of them were clearly mercenaries, but part of them had quite a vague understanding on how they get into the war and how they get in captivity. So there was a first idea that probably some people are trafficked to Russian army, so they might be victims of human trafficking and abuse. We had a chance to interview them. So we interviewed people, prisoners of war in Ukraine. And this report is about Bangladesh. But Bangladeshians, they are not the most, the number of Bangladeshians is not the biggest. So the biggest so far when it comes to South Asia is Nepal and Sri Lanka. But our colleagues from Fortify Rights were able to also talk to Bangladeshi people who were able to return from the front lines, and with families of those who missed. So we still don't know if they are alive or not, but probably not. Victims of human trafficking. And they were able to talk to those who were at the moment of interviewing in Russia. So they were on the side of Russian Federation. And we concluded that most of people who were involved in Russian aggression against Ukraine, at least from Bangladeshi side, but not only, Sri Lanka, also Nepal, they might be victims of human trafficking. So there were stories like, I can remember someone who were proposed to have a job in some European countries. And they were said that they just have to spend some time in Russia just to wait for their European visa. And suddenly they found themselves on a battlefield. Part of people were told that they knew that they somehow will be involved in Russian war against Ukraine, but on a so-called civilian positions. So it means plants and other form, like not the fighters, but they were throughout to participate physically in the war. We now want to start the process in Ukraine to jointly with international organizations who work on human trafficking to settle like in a commission or like in a kind of commission that can, assess the situation of each person that probably or might be a victim of human trafficking, and to divide prisoners of war into those who might be clear fighters or mercenaries, and those who are just the victims of human trafficking. We, of course, like the recommendations are here inside, so you can look into them. I don't know if there will be any questions. I will be happy to talk more about this.
Well, I was going to ask you, I mean, you've raised the issue that a number of these people from South Asia are victims of human trafficking who ended up in the Russian military. And you've proposed that there be some sort of victim identification for the trafficking victims.
We hope that, it's
So
quite a new mechanism. We have to understand that as far as we know, there is no such example, so that will be like a unique mechanism.
So then I guess, what is the reaction of the Ukrainian government? Are they supportive?
Yeah.
Obviously a lot of these people want to go home.
That is the thing. We have, the economical situation in Ukraine is quite, complicated now because the war is going on. The ambassador explained everything quite clearly before me, so I will not reiterate it. And we, Ukrainian army, they have to follow international rules. So prisoners of war are kept in the facilities. So, Ukrainian government have to pay for them, to stay in at least normal conditions. The problem is that the countries of their origin or don't want to request them back, or even don't want to recognize that their citizens are in Ukrainian captivity. So that is the problem. We just came from Bangladesh just recently, and we raised this issue with the Bangladeshi authorities. And we want to raise this issue with authorities of Sri Lanka, Nepal, and other countries. They have to request their people back. That's the first problem. And the second problem is that people who are in captivity, that's mostly happened to those who are from Africa, but at least I will explain this. They believe that before they were signed the contracts about the joining to the Russian army, and you have to understand that all contracts that foreigners are signing with Russian army, as far as we know, is just in Russian language. So they usually don't understand what they are signing. It's just a document in Cyrillic. So before they signed this contract, they were said that after a couple of months, usually it might be 6 months or 1 year of working or fighting, in reality, on the Russian side, they will get Russian citizenship. And a lot of people believe that they already have it. So even during the interviewing people in Ukrainian captivity, we heard that they were like, no, don't call my country of origin to return me back. Please tell to Russian authorities that I'm here because I'm the Russian citizen. And of course they are not. It's a lie. But they believe that they will return to Russia, they will get their money because they are paid, of course, for this, and that they already have the Russian citizenship. And on the other side, you don't know, but there is a swaps of prisoners of war between Russia and Ukraine. It happens not quite often, but time to time it happens. Since the first day of the full-scale invasion, Russia never called for any foreigner to swap, for a swap. I mean, a swap of prisoners of war. They usually call for those who has Russian passports, so Russian originals. But those who are foreigners, they just like in the limbo. Their countries of origin don't call for them. They don't want to return. In some cases they want, but still their countries don't call for them, and Russia don't call for them also. So they are in the limbo, and Ukrainian government, in a moment now when they don't know what to do with these people.
I mean, it sounds like that there has to be the IOM involved in assisted voluntary return. I mean, there is an IOM mechanism for doing that. Is IOM involved in this at all?
That's our recommendation. So one of our recommendations is involving IAM or other UN or international, bodies to rethink with the Ukrainian government how this might be solved, because, there's quite a burden on Ukrainian economy. That's a huge issue with the human rights, of course. And these people could not stay forever in the captivity. Yeah, for what reason? So we have to do somehow with this or deal with this, but it's just dead end moment.
Okay. We have also online, we have Ajahn Sipapa Petmistry, who's from the Faculty of Law of Chulalongkorn University. She's a former representative, she actually was the first representative from Thailand of the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, long-time lecturer at Mahidol University, so now she's moved over to Chula. I wanted to ask her to come in and comment a little bit about what she's heard and the sort of regional implications for this.
Thank you, Phil, and thank you for allowing me to join online. Due to my health problem. I just want to thank the two previous speakers, which actually allow me to see the situation clearer. And I think what Oksana was sharing with us was actually a shock for me, because I think the report that you mentioned earlier and that Oksana was actually sharing with us, not only is shocking, but also it actually reminds us that in the world, everything can happen. Can be happening, including, trafficking in person, for war. So that's very serious for me, working on the issue of forced migration. I just, because I'll be having about 7 to 10 minutes, I guess, that what Phil was saying at the very beginning. I'll be focusing on, as I said, I'll be focusing on South Asia only, where I know best. Focusing on 3 points. The first one is actually about the problem of principle. Well, when I say the problem of principle, I'll be elaborating later. The second one, actually the failure of the international community, to deal with the issue of accountability. I'm glad to hear from the first speaker that there has been attempts or at least, a kind of trying to hold perpetrators, in this case Russia, accountable to their acts of, mass atrocities. May I put it that I can put it that way. And the third one, implication, as Phil has mentioned, implication on Myanmar. Because of the closer tie between Russia and Myanmar. So I start with the first. As I guess we all know that countries in Indo-Pacific, especially in South Asia, remain very committed to the Westphalian notion of international relations of statehood. Where states enjoys sovereignty and territorial integrity, which means that we are free from external interference in running the domestic affairs. Although from human rights perspective, I have been actually arguing about this principle from time to time, especially when it comes to non-interference, especially when it comes to to human rights violations in one country and ASEAN, we cannot intervene. That's I put it outside there. As I said, this is especially true for members of ASEAN, whose the core principle rests on non-interference consensus and the peaceful settlement of dispute. And of course, ASEAN continue to uphold these principles as long as the overarching framework on which its embedded practice is maintained, especially at international level. But when international level, as I mentioned earlier, at international level, this principle is no longer adhered. What does it mean for, and not only for South Asia, but I think for the whole world, which means that those with more powers can always invade countries with less power, and that is, I think, dangerous. We were actually discussing, from time to time, whether there would be a possibility, let's say, for China, to actually do something with Taiwan. And I think it said, as the first speaker has mentioned, it set precedents, for other bigger powers to actually invade any countries that they deem well, not necessary, but they could do what they wanted to do. So this is my first point. The second one is actually about, as I mentioned, the one of the concern, I didn't say it at the very beginning. One of the concern is actually about the as you know, South and South Asia are pioneer and are actually members of non-aligned movements. What has been happening in between Russia and Ukraine, or invasion of Russia in Ukraine, put the South and South Asian countries in a rather difficult situation, in the sense that they seem to be quite divisive, in my opinion, because when they were to vote at the UNGA, you might notice already that there was no consensus, among within South Asia and within South Asia. As I said, they were divisive. And this division, within the South Asian bloc and South Asian bloc, when it comes to non-aligned movements, I think this is also quite dangerous. I'm not saying that remaining neutral is good. At some point, especially as someone like myself working in human rights field, we cannot remain neutral. But in this case, at least during the war, I think the two blocs, I mean South Asian and South Asian, they should be avoiding to be divisive. There has to be some kind of consensus, especially condemning the aggressor in this case, the Russia. And my last point is actually about, the close tie between, or the closer tie between Russia and Myanmar. This has a very serious impact on human rights violations, which has been going on in Myanmar. As long as Russia continues to supply and support Myanmar, it also means that the military junta could actually crash ethnic groups as much as they want because of the weapons supplied by Russia and of course North Korea. And I think this has a lot of impacts for ASEAN as a whole, because as long as Myanmar, the Burmese junta, Myanmar junta, continue to enjoy support from Russia, it also means that they could continue to wage the wars against any ethnic groups, which actually result in continuing human rights violations within in Myanmar, and ASEAN member states could not do much on this. I guess I would be stopping here, Phil. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Obviously, thank you. Obviously, it raises very serious concerns for ASEAN and ASEAN's sort of role in the world when it can't even decide whether what side it wants to be on when we're talking about Russian aggression against Ukraine. Quite disturbing. So I'm going to turn now to Amy Smith. Amy's the executive director of Fortify Rights, which is the organization that's hosting us here today. And I wanted to ask Amy for her perspectives, particularly on Myanmar, where I know she's worked for many years, as well as the sort of things that you all found in terms of the Bangladeshis who were being trafficked to the front lines of the Russian conflict.
Thank you, Phil. So over the past few years, we've watched as the world has watched as Russia's war in Ukraine has unfolded mostly as a European conflict. But I think we can see now that the consequences reach far beyond just Europe. For myself, I've had the opportunity to travel to Ukraine, and I've experienced firsthand the air raid sirens that sound multiple times a day. When buildings are shaking and following drone attacks, the constant checking of your phone to see where the missiles are actually landing, but just also the stress of everyday life of being under attack. And for millions of Ukrainians, including our colleagues at Hounds, this is daily life. The war in Ukraine is indeed devastating, but its impacts are extending far beyond the battlefield. Russia's war is affecting human rights and security also here in Southeast Asia. It is shaping migration patterns, enabling trafficking networks, strengthening authoritarian alliances, and contributing to human rights abuses across the region. One of our clearest examples of Russia's regional impact is its deepening relationship with Myanmar's military junta. Since the military coup in Myanmar, Russia has become one of the junta's most important international partners, and this partnership has deepened significantly. In March 2025, Russia's President Vladimir Putin met with Myanmar junta leader Min Aung Hlaing in Moscow, and that's where they discussed cooperation agreements that spanned nuclear energy, space cooperation, trade, education, and defense. And even just last year, those two sides have expanded those diplomatic ties significantly. Last week, Russia's Security Council chief traveled to Myanmar, and they signed a 5-year military cooperation agreement that covered things like defense cooperation, training, intelligence sharing, and strategic cooperation. These agreements are not an abstract diplomatic gesture. These have direct consequences for civilians. Russia has supplied fighter jets, helicopters, drones, and military training to Myanmar's armed groups, or armed forces. These aircraft have been used in airstrikes that have killed civilians, targeted protected sites, and terrorized communities across the country. In September, the Fortify Rights team, we published this report called Crashing Down on Us. This exposes the indiscriminate nature of those of the junta's airstrike attacks. These attacks constitute war crimes. According to the National Unity Government of Myanmar, the number of junta airstrike attacks have doubled between 2024 and 2025, rising from 2,400 to 4,800. Without international support, without weapons, spare parts, training, and diplomatic cover, Myanmar's military would be significantly weakened today. But instead, there's external backing from Russia and others, and that's helping to sustain the military to continue this war against its own people in Myanmar. The crisis in Myanmar does not stay inside Myanmar. It produces refugee flows, human trafficking, cross-border crimes, and instability across the region. Earlier this week, Fortify Rights and Truth Hounds, as we were speaking earlier, we released the joint report, this one, I Was Tricked into the War. And we were documenting how Bangladeshi men are being trafficked into Russia's war on Ukraine. This report exposes a system of deception that has turned vulnerable Bangladeshi men into expendable manpower in Russia's war. These men were promised civilian jobs abroad. They were then transported to other countries and transferred to Russia, where they were given contracts in Russian language that they could not read. They were pressured to sign documents that they could not understand. They were told that they had been bought. They were threatened when they objected, beaten, had their passports confiscated. They were denied pay, and then they were prevented from leaving. These men were often sent to the front lines where they had little to no training. Some were killed, some were wounded, some were trapped into conflict zones without pay or communication. This constitutes trafficking, and it involves a network that spans multiple countries, demonstrating how this conflict reverberates far from the front lines. It also raises a fundamental question about what the governments of Southeast Asia are going to do. How should this region respond to a war that is affecting people in this region? Many governments in the region pursue what they describe as neutrality, which in practice includes maintaining tourism, business, and diplomatic ties with Russia. ASEAN governments have often taken a similar approach with Myanmar, but this is not neutrality. Not when it comes to dealing with regime leaders that are unapologetically responsible for war crimes, aggression, trafficking, and other destabilizing violations. Accepting the situation or remaining silent risks normalizing it, and that normalization has consequences. The Myanmar coup that took place in February 2021, the Myanmar coup took place in February 2021, and Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine took place almost exactly 1 year later. These events are not isolated. They are part of a broader pattern in which authoritarian regimes have supported one another and undermined international law and have placed civilians at risk. Governments in Southeast Asia, including Thailand and ASEAN and the regional bloc, they need to take a stronger stance, not only on Russia, but also on the Myanmar junta. This means supporting justice and accountability mechanisms for international crimes, denying legitimacy to authoritarian regimes like Russia and the Myanmar junta, strengthening protections for trafficking survivors and their families, and standing with civil society that's fighting for democracy and human rights. The question now is, how is the international community, and particularly the governments in Southeast Asia, how are they going to respond? Are they going to respond with clarity and resolve for the moment that it demands right now? Russia's war in Ukraine is not a distant conflict for Southeast Asia. It's already here. It's among us. It's shaping trafficking networks, it's fueling violence in Myanmar, and it's testing the region's commitment to human rights. Neutrality on its face, in the face of this reality, is not neutrality. It is permission. And that's something that I think all governments in Southeast Asia really need to be thinking about and responding to. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we get into questions from the audience, and people should be thinking about questions, I wanted to ask one question, which is, I understand you all just met with the new Bangladesh government talking about the cases of these men who were trafficked from Bangladesh to the front lines in Russia. So what were the results of those consultations? Did you get assurances that they're going to do something about it?
Yeah, we had an opportunity to meet with the government in Bangladesh, and they're a very new government, so they're still, sorting out their administration and figuring out what policies they're taking up as priorities. So it was a wonderful opportunity to be able to meet with them at this time when they're still trying to learn about, where they're going to be going. We were able to meet with the Deputy Minister for Labor, and we explained the situation. He came to us with an open ear and was very interested to hear about these findings. It's a unique situation to hear about Bangladeshis, not a unique situation about hearing about Bangladeshis getting trafficked. That's something that has been a long-term problem in Bangladesh. But to hear about Bangladeshis being trafficked and then being sent to the front lines and ending up in a conflict zone where they're, under extreme threat. So he was very interested in that. He had committed basically to look into the situation. We have committed to share with him details about the recruiting agencies that we know are involved in these networks, as well as linking him to families that have people that are on the front lines or are with the Russian forces. So we're hoping that he will take those actions, and there's been some good commitments on their side. There definitely needs to be more follow-up on it, but yeah, I don't know if there's more you want to.
No.
No. I mean, this sort of thing sounds like, as part of the larger EU commitment to trying to help the situation in Ukraine and help Ukraine, that, being involved in dealing with trying to curtail this kind of trafficking of men to the front lines in Russia, whether it comes from Bangladesh or Sri Lanka or Nepal or countries in Africa, would be something that the EU would want to take up. And has that been discussed with them?
So I think in this case we have to take into account the routes that the human trafficking are using. So mostly they're not directly from the Bangladesh to EU. So they use different countries like Arab Emirates and Turkey and what else? Do you remember?
Saudi.
Arabia.
Saudi Arabia. Yeah, right. Thank you very much. And Saudi Arabia for this. So usually people come to these countries and get visas there. So that's not that easy to, to follow the whole process. That's the first thing. And second, still we have to, take into account the number of people from South Asia who are trafficked to these countries without any documents, and they use different trafficking routes for that. So yes, on the one hand, yes, the EU have to take it into account, but I think the global community have to take it into account also, because the impact and influence, it's not rather only inside the EU, but all around the globe.
I'm just thinking it would be something that like the EU could convene some sort of larger meeting with the IOM and some of these countries where they're transiting, in order to try to figure out some strategy to stop it that the EU would then fund.
Yes. But the thing is that I think that I would again say that it's more global than EU and more general. So I think it influences everyone, because it's, of course, as a Ukrainian, I'm very much interested in cutting fuels to the war, because the less people will be in Russian army, the more chances for us to defend ourselves. But I think for other countries, it's also equally important, because the less people, foreigners, or just people in the Russian army, there are more chances, just to stop this war of aggression quicker, easier. So we all have to be interested in this. And of course, as the issue of human rights and the issue of human lives, which is like the first issue that everyone has to take into account, of course.
Yep. Okay. So there is a microphone in the back. If people have questions, please identify yourself. If you have an affiliation that you want to share, please share that too. Indicate who you're directing your question to, and of course, I think we still have Ajansi Papa online as well. But in any case, go ahead, please.
Yeah, my name is Brian Gruber, associated with no one in particular. I traveled across Ukraine in August, from the Polish to the Russian border down to Odessa interviewing people about life during wartime, and it was an extraordinary experience. And as an American, I found that the appreciation and understanding of Ukrainians as to what liberal democracy was about, what freedom and the UN Charter was about, far exceeded anything that I might see in my own country. So my question is, with the evident and complete moral and intellectual collapse of the American government as a bulwark of liberal democracy, where do you see leadership coming for the world fighting this kind of aggression in the form of institutions or individual leaders or countries? And thank you for a great panel tonight.
Yeah, I mean, it's a complicated question. It's a challenging question right now. What we are seeing is that as there's been a shift in the dynamics around the U.S.'s role, particularly in defending human rights or being a standard bearer, that it's opened up more opportunities for Russia to do what it's doing, which is basically coming in, supporting other, authoritarian regimes, making alliances that are not helpful, and basically supporting a really poor agenda on human rights, no agenda on human rights. So there is a big problem there. Europe, of course, it needs to take more action on this and see human rights as being something that needs to be a priority, because human rights are going to be the thing that is going to help to protect other nations as well. And it helps to solidify and give stability, particularly in a time when there is war going on. But there is definitely a dearth of leadership that needs to come in, and we need more governments to be able to take a stand on these issues.
As a Ukrainian, maybe my answer will be a bit idealistic, but that's who we are. We still very much count on these big economies and big countries, like those who have nuclear weapons, biggest economies, and the influence. But maybe now we might find ourselves in the moment when, that not the biggest, player, but someone in the middle, and even the small countries could join with the different new unions, maybe not economical, but rather political, or maybe even, military, we still don't know. But, there might be an opportunity to found the new contracts, new negotiation, and new connections, which might be quite surprisingly new for, we didn't expect that. I didn't expect that I will be in Thailand 4 years ago, sitting here and talking to you. I would not expect, on the other hand, that, my apartment would be destroyed by a missile attack this year. Everything happens, and we can look at this moment like this is a challenge, but I would rather look at this as an opportunity for those who didn't have a chance before to speak.
John, would you like to say something about?
Yeah, I just want to add on Amy's points, because I feel that we don't have much hope in the sense that, globally, we see that the liberal democracy is actually is shrinking, if not almost collapsing as of now. So it's a very complicated question, and whether or not I see, some leaders, at least I cannot see any in Southeast Asia, my own region, even, in Europe. I think, there are still, a few countries that we can look up, but, what is happening in Middle East currently shows very clearly that liberal democracy is completely collapsed, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would add 2 words. I'd say Mark Carney and his speech at Davos, which was actually, I think, a very interesting middle way for middle powers. So where's Korea on this? Where's Japan on this? Can things like the Quad carry more weight? I think that there has to be some creative thinking out of the box to figure out how you replace the absence of the United States during this Trump regime interregnum. Please.
Hi, Tomasz Augustyniak. I'm a correspondent for Polish media, covering mostly Southeast Asia, but obviously I'm interested in whatever's happening in Ukraine. And as you mentioned in a private conversation, it is always interconnected. And I would like to get into, these connections between what is happening in, the minds of Asians, particularly people who are being trafficked into the war, and the Russian minders. Because back home we obviously do know about the appalling atrocities being committed by the Russians in Ukraine. It is a very different story in the global south, particularly in the countries that you mentioned before. So I wondered to what extent the people who are trafficking citizens of Asian countries, of the global south countries, are using as coercion methods, mostly economic arguments, saying that, well, you are about to get hundreds of thousands of Russian rubles and a citizenship, or to what extent they are able somehow to convince these people that it is Russia that is right morally, on moral grounds in the war. And if that would be the case, how this problem could be solved from the point of view of narratives that Ukraine and the Western world could bring about to this part of the world. And a second brief question, if you allow me, would be about technicalities, because you mentioned before, well, I didn't get to get a copy of the report, but you mentioned that even though you focus on Bangladesh in the report, the largest countries, the largest groups of citizens of Asian countries are Sri Lankans and Nepalese, right? So what are other citizens of other countries? Could you walk us through the numbers a little bit, and also how these trafficking networks are being constructed and run depending on the country? Is it the same pattern in every country, or is it different depending on the country?
Do you want to take that one first? Just to go back to your first question on how the coercion methods work and how people are, how the recruitment brokers are basically convincing people to go over. The first part is to just recognize that a lot of the men who are being trafficked, they're young men from rural communities, they're from families that are in debt already. They're people with limited migration pathways, and they're individuals that are desperate for work. So Bangladesh is kind of a prime target for these recruitment agents that see that as, basically a population that is looking for opportunities and desperate for opportunities. And unfortunately, they're taking advantage of that vulnerable population. A lot of the men don't know that they're going to Russia, so they think that they're going to places and destinations in Europe. They think they're going to, actually, they think that they're going to Poland. They think they're going to Italy. There's a lot of different places in Europe that they think they're going to. But then they're being told in order to get there, they need to first go to a second country, such as the UAE or Saudi Arabia, and then from there they're transferred to Russia, and as one more step before they can get to where they think they're going, which would be in some European country. And then at that point, they're being presented with these contracts that are in Russian. They don't know what they say, and they're just being transported to the front lines. So there's a lot of lack of information for people who are actually caught up in these trafficking networks, and they don't have a lot of leverage to be able to, have decisions. There is no informed consent. There is no decision making that's happening. Once they're caught up in it, they're just, in a network, and they can't get out. So it's a really sad situation where you see men who find themselves in this position, and it's really difficult to escape it. This is why we're trying to bring attention to it and figuring out ways to make sure that governments are taking the action that needs to happen to make sure that it's not only prevented so that people don't get caught up in these rings, but also cracking down on the recruitment networks, and also helping families to recover, their family members that are being trapped.
Yeah, so, I mean, you maybe have some questions, I see, So shall we answer? continue answering.
Well, yeah, the question
Because I
also
see
about the narrative, to what extent, other than what you have just mentioned, these methods of coercion, pretty much lying to the people, there are some cases that they are being told the truth, and they are willingly going to fight, and what would be the reasons behind that?
Yeah, so there are some cases where people are, they're volunteering, to go to Russia to join the military, but a lot of them don't think that they're going to the front lines, and a lot of times they're thinking that they're receiving payments for being part of the military. So again, it has an economic component to it. They think that they're going to get Russian citizenship, which is actually something that Russian law says that they would be able to receive if they're part of different aspects of the Russian military. So they're thinking that this is going to be a positive movement in their life, that they're going to be able to, finally figure out a way to have more benefits than what they have in their current situation. Again, these are vulnerable populations, so it's a challenge. For those who join for ideological purposes, we didn't find a lot of them from Southeast Asia, if any. I don't know if...
There's, as far as I know, there was no one who had the ideological background for this, but correct me if I'm wrong. But as far as I know, no one. We know that they exist, so there are some popular, social media, so there's accounts in social media, and there's some bloggers who now, they make it public that they're like, I'm joining the Russian army, I do it for the purpose, but that's literally small amount, couple of people we know, and those who we met, who we had a chance to talk to, they don't support it ideologically for sure. And the same situation is in Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. I mean, I will speak now because it's like a different part of work, but answering about the roots, we're still investigating. It's not that easy to investigate, the passes that are used for this purpose. But we believe that, the theory we now checking if it really works is that mostly the same routes that are used just for classical, sorry for saying that, for classical human trafficking, we cannot use this way, right? It just sounds weird. For human rights trafficking routes that are used for other purposes, just used by Russians. So they just use something that already exists and had been existing since, ages. Sorry for saying that, yeah? They use this just for this purpose. So the new component is that Russia now plays this role rather than they, developed a new ways or new forms. So something that was really rooted into the everyday life of these people in poverty and country that are still in development, yeah. In the poverty, they just use it. I don't know if I answered your question. Maybe you want to clarify about, yeah.
Well, I'm pretty sure that since there's nobody else behind me, I would just like to ask about the differences between different countries, because you mentioned that they have been using the existing human trafficking networks and systems, possibly the people who are dealing with trafficked people for different purposes, for criminal groups and so on. But how does it differ depending on the country? Say, how different is it in Sri Lanka and how different it is in Bangladesh and somewhere in Southeast
for
Asia?
example, in Bangladesh, as I think I may have already a bit said already, people pay to these agents, recruitment agents, to start the process. So those victims we spoke to, they really sell their lands or their houses to get money, to give this money to the broker, and to be able to start, to get the opportunity to be involved in the process of recruitment. Without knowing that it's about the army. Just to be paid. The average payment is around $2,000 per month, and usually Bangladeshi people, they pay to these recruitment agents from 1 to 5 $1,000, which is quite a huge amount for Bangladesh. And as far as we know, in Sri Lanka, for example, and in Nepal, they don't pay. So, like, in this country, in Bangladesh, the system works in the way that usually people pay to the recruitment agents. They become involved in the process, and that's how, what they do. They help them to deal with documents, and they organize the whole process. So, as it was before the full-scale invasion, they were paying, and now they are paying, but they're paying to be injured or killed on the battlefield. That's the big difference. But in other countries, they don't pay. They just send application, talk to recruitment agencies, as it was before the full-scale invasion. And now they just use the same patterns and the same ways. Sometimes don't know when again that they are signed the contract to the Russian army in Russian language without any clue what they are signing for. That's another thing. Like I think we didn't mention that because these people from South and Southeast Asia, but all around the globe, joining the Russian army by signing the classical Russian contract, Ukrainian authorities treat them just as prisoners of war. We don't treat them as mercenaries or something else. So because they have this contract, officially we treat them as prisoners of war, which make all the process much complicated. I mean, when it comes to the possibility to swap or return them to other countries, or countries of origin, or making other steps. That's why we need these international mechanisms or international organizations that could provide us with some ideas, work jointly with the Ukrainian government, and to rethink what we can do to solve the problem.
Just actually on that point, and I think actually to fill your earlier question on IOM's involvement in trying to get people back to Bangladesh, one of the things that's interesting is that in Ukraine, people who are captured and are prisoners of war, they're just seen as prisoners of war. But under international law, the status of having prisoner of war status does not erase the fact that they're also human trafficking survivors. And so therefore, the Ukrainian government should be recognizing, they should be going through a whole process to identify potential survivors of human trafficking that are caught up within the prisoners of war situation, and then providing them the protections as survivors of human trafficking, which would be including to return them to Bangladesh and figuring out ways to navigate to make sure that they have the rights that they should have under as being survivors of human trafficking. The other part of that too is mentioning the signing of contracts. So when they're signing contracts, there's an idea like that there would be some sort of consent. So to your question around whether people ideologically are signing up for this, and if they're signing those contracts thinking like, yeah, I'm signing up for the war, in most cases, no, they can't read those contracts. They're not understanding them. But even if they could, if they didn't realize that those contracts were for like the Russian military and didn't realize that they were going to the front lines, that the fact that they're signing those contracts doesn't mean that they've actually consented to go to the front lines or to join the military. That is still deception, and that still qualifies as part of the human trafficking ring. It's part of the pipeline of human trafficking. So yes, they're signing contracts, but...
And the reality for these people is following. So they not properly trained, they don't have proper ammunition or protection systems. They don't speak usually the language, of course. And we interviewed, the colleagues, not us, but Fortify Rights co-interviewed one person who even didn't get that it's not training anymore, that it's already ongoing fight, so he just didn't get that he found himself really in the fight. So, if the person would have an ideological point of view, or, like this idea of coming and doing something, I believe that they would feel it differently, and the answers would be, of course, differently. So I don't think there are any lies on that. That's really clear human trafficking issues.
John, would you like to comment?
Yeah, maybe very briefly feel that I think we are talking about two different strands of law, international law. One is humanitarian law, which is based on Geneva Conventions, and another one is human rights law. In the case that we are currently discussing, it's clearly human rights law that prevails, meaning that we have to consider those people as victims of trafficking. And I think it's, as you rightly mentioned, Phil, that it's in the fall under the responsibility of IOM. So definitely, whether or not they are voluntary, going because of economic incentives, but once they were sent to the front line without, of course, without voluntarily doing it, as I mentioned, that human rights law prevails here.
Thank you. Okay. Time for one last question. If I don't see one, we're gonna call it. Okay. Well, let me thank our panelists for a very entertaining and interesting discussion. I mean, this is the first time I've seen the Geneva Convention square off against international human rights law, as Ajahn Sipapa quite succinctly put it. I mean, it seems to me that, each of the various governments involved here have a lot of homework to do. But it would seem to me also that Ukraine has an incentive to try to figure out a way to have these foreign prisoners of war go home, in part so they don't have to feed them and take care of them and do all those things. And if there's a way for someone to fund IOM to do that, and of course the US is not doing that anymore, not doing very much of it, so IOM, like many of these UN agencies, don't have much money, then it would be worthwhile trying to sort out a solution. I think actually if you found a way to get those people out of those camps, you'd get a more full exploration of their story, once they're in a place where they can talk freely. And so hopefully a way can be found. I mean, but this research has sort of cracked open the issue. It's an important step forward. I want to thank the panelists. I want to thank Ajahn Sipapa for joining us remotely. I want to thank the chargé for sharing his time and his thoughts with us. Let's give them all a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Phil.
Time for a beer.